This is not a warehouse. It was a machine for turning people's lives into money. Inside the Canada warehouses at Auschwitz, everything was sorted. Cash, jewelry, gold teeth, art, clothing. Across occupied Europe, the same story: confiscations, forced exchanges, and occupation levies. The Reichsbank melted, tallied, and monetized it, swapping stolen gold and currencies for oil, metals, engines, paying the bills of modern war. Add it up in today's dollars. Roughly 180 billion. In this documentary, we follow the pipeline, Canada to Reichsbank to battlefield, and show the receipts. August 1944. A prisoner transport arrives at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Within minutes, families are torn apart on the selection ramp. But something else happens that night, something that transforms personal tragedy into industrial-scale theft. SS guards meticulously catalog every possession: wedding rings, eyeglasses, children's shoes, gold teeth pulled from corpses still warm. These items don't disappear into chaos. They enter a system so efficient, so organized, that it will funnel an estimated $180 billion in today's value directly into the Nazi war machine. This wasn't random plunder. This was economic warfare, executed with the same precision as military operations. The Nazis called one section of their looting operation Canada, named after the land of plenty, where riches seemed endless. But Canada wasn't a place of hope. It was a sorting facility where prisoners processed the belongings of the condemned, transforming wedding bands into bullets, suitcases into salaries, and the last remnants of destroyed communities into funding for their own destruction. How did personal possessions become state assets? How did gold stolen from the dying end up in Swiss bank vaults, sanitized and legitimized? And how much of this blood money financed the very war that claimed 50 million lives? Tonight, we trace the journey of stolen wealth from the gas chambers of Auschwitz to the counting houses of Zurich, from the Reichsbank vaults in Berlin to the battlefields where Nazi soldiers spent money extracted from their victims' mouths. This is the story of history's most systematic theft and the uncomfortable truth about who profited from genocide. The infrastructure for mass theft didn't emerge overnight. It evolved through brutal trial and error, beginning long before the first transports arrived at death camps. The foundation was laid in 1938 during Kristallnacht, when Nazi mobs destroyed Jewish businesses across Germany and Austria. But the violence served a secondary purpose. While synagogues burned, bureaucrats were already designing the paperwork that would legalize theft on an unprecedented scale. The legal mechanism was deceptively simple. A series of decrees stripped Jews of property rights entirely. The Reich flight tax, originally designed to prevent capital flight, was weaponized to confiscate wealth from those fleeing persecution. Jewish-owned businesses were Aryanized, transferred to non-Jewish owners at fractions of their value, with proceeds flowing into state coffers. Bank accounts were frozen, then emptied. Real estate was seized. Insurance policies were voided. By 1939, German Jews had been systematically stripped of an estimated 9 billion Reichsmarks in assets, roughly $40 billion today. But this was merely the prelude. The true scale of theft would only emerge with the implementation of the final solution, decided at the Wannsee Conference in January 1942. The conference minutes are chilling in their bureaucratic precision, outlining the logistics of mass murder with the emotional detachment of a corporate merger. Yet buried within those administrative details was an economic calculation. 11 million Jews across Europe represented not just a race to be eliminated, but an asset base to be liquidated. The SS, under Heinrich Himmler, took primary responsibility for what they termed utilization of seized property. This wasn't assigned to common criminals. The operation required meticulous organization, detailed record keeping, and absolute secrecy about the source of the wealth. The Economic and Administrative Main Office, the SS-WVHA, created an entire department, Department D, specifically to manage the economic exploitation of concentration camp prisoners and their possessions. At Auschwitz-Birkenau, the system reached its most refined form. The camp wasn't just a killing center. It was a processing facility where human beings were reduced to their component economic values. Those selected for immediate death contributed their possessions. Those selected for labor contributed their work until they died. Nothing was wasted. Even the ashes from the crematoria were used as fertilizer and road fill. The Nazis had industrialized death and industrialized theft on an equally massive scale. What made this possible wasn't just Nazi ideology. It required the willing participation of thousands of ordinary bureaucrats, accountants, and bankers who transformed murder into money. The trains arrived day and night, cattle cars packed with families who had been told they were being resettled to work camps in the East. They brought what they could carry, the last possessions of entire communities. Suitcases carefully labeled with names and addresses, wrapped food for the journey, family photographs, children's toys, prayer books, and whatever jewelry or currency they had managed to hide from previous confiscations. They believed they would need these items in their new lives. They were wrong. On the selection ramp at Auschwitz-Birkenau, SS doctors determined who would live temporarily and who would die immediately. But another selection was already underway. SS guards directed prisoners to leave their luggage on the platform. "You'll get it back after the showers," they were told. It was the last time they would see anything they owned. Within hours, most would be dead. Their possessions would enter Canada. Canada was 30 barracks located between the main Auschwitz camp and Birkenau. The name came from prisoners who saw it as a land of unimaginable wealth. Storerooms stacked floor to ceiling with suitcases, bundles, and boxes. At its peak, approximately 2,000 prisoners worked in Canada, sorting through the belongings of the condemned. It was grim, surreal work. Jewish prisoners processed the last possessions of other Jewish prisoners, many from their own communities, sometimes from their own families. The sorting was methodical. Everything was categorized and inventoried. Clothing was separated by type and quality. Men's suits in one pile, women's dresses in another, children's clothing in a third. Shoes were sorted by size. Eyeglasses were collected by the thousands. Brushes, combs, razors, scissors. Every mundane item of daily life was catalogued. Prisoners checked every seam, every lining, every hidden pocket for concealed valuables. They found currency from across Europe, jewelry sewn into coat linings, diamonds hidden in shoe heels, gold coins wrapped in cloth. The most valuable items went into separate containers. Gold and silver jewelry, watches, precious stones, foreign currency, and Reich marks were counted and recorded. Wedding rings were particularly abundant. Prisoners described sorting through mountains of rings, each one representing a marriage, a commitment, a life now ended. Some still bore inscriptions, names, dates, words of love. These personal artifacts were treated as raw materials, catalogued by weight and precious metal content. Testimony from survivors who worked in Canada reveals the psychological toll. They handled baby clothes, knowing the infants who wore them were dead. They sorted photographs of families who had just been gassed. They found food prepared by mothers who believed they were packing for a new life. The work offered slight survival advantages: better food, indoor work, occasional access to items they could trade. But it came at the cost of intimate, daily confrontation with genocide's human dimension. Not everything stayed organized. SS guards regularly stole from the stolen goods, a practice so common that the SS had to establish internal security measures to prevent excessive pilferage. Some guards accumulated personal fortunes. Others sent packages home to their families containing clothing and household items taken from the dead. The hypocrisy was absolute. SS regulations strictly forbade unauthorized acquisition of Jewish property, even as the entire operation was based on systematic theft. From Canada, the processed goods began their transformation. The personal possessions of murdered families would soon become anonymous assets in the Nazi war economy. But first, they had to be shipped, sorted again, valued, and converted into usable resources. The journey from personal belonging to war material was just beginning. The gold arrived at the Reichsbank in Berlin in shipments marked with clinical, bureaucratic precision. The documentation didn't mention Auschwitz, Treblinka, or Majdanek. Instead, the records used the code name Operation Reinhard, ostensibly named after Reinhard Heydrich, the architect of the final solution who was assassinated in 1942. The operation's real purpose was documented in internal SS correspondence, the complete economic exploitation of the final solution. What arrived at the Reichsbank was staggering in its intimacy and horror. Dental gold, teeth pulled from corpses by prisoner work details, arrived by the kilogram. Wedding rings, melted down or still bearing inscriptions, filled containers. Gold watches, jewelry, and coins from across occupied Europe poured into the central bank's vaults. Between 1942 and 1944, the SS delivered approximately 76 tons of gold to the Reichsbank through Operation Reinhard alone. This doesn't include gold seized through other channels or from earlier phases of persecution. The Reichsbank was Germany's central financial institution, equivalent to the Federal Reserve or Bank of England. It was not some criminal enterprise operating in shadows. It was the legitimate heart of German finance, governed by banking professionals who understood exactly where this gold originated. Emil Puhl, the vice president of the Reichsbank, personally oversaw the acceptance and processing of SS gold shipments. He couldn't claim ignorance. Some shipments contained items that made their origin unmistakable. Dental bridges with teeth still attached, jewelry with personal inscriptions, items that couldn't possibly come from legitimate sources. The gold had to be refined and sanitized before it could enter international markets. Much of this work was contracted to Degussa, one of Germany's largest chemical and metals companies. Degussa operated refineries that melted down the gold, removing any identifying characteristics and recast it into standard bars suitable for international trade. The company processed gold from Operation Reinhard throughout the war, fully aware of its source. After the war, Degussa would claim it was simply fulfilling contracts with state entities, a defense that would prove legally sufficient but morally bankrupt. The refining process was deliberately designed to obscure provenance. Wedding rings became anonymous ingots. Dental gold was mixed with other gold to dilute its recognizable characteristics. Each bar was stamped with standard markings showing weight and purity, creating the appearance of legitimate bullion. The individual stories, the marriages, the smiles, the lives, were literally melted away, leaving only monetary value. Why did the Nazis need this gold? Germany was fighting a total war on multiple fronts, requiring resources far beyond its domestic capacity. International trade required hard currency or gold, especially for dealings with neutral countries that wouldn't accept increasingly worthless Reich marks. Switzerland, Turkey, Spain, Portugal, and Sweden all demanded payment in gold for vital war materials. Swiss banks, in particular, became crucial intermediaries for converting stolen gold into usable foreign currency. The Reichsbank's own records, captured after the war, document the systematic conversion of victim gold into war materials. Gold was used to purchase wolfram from Portugal, essential for armor-piercing ammunition. It bought ball bearings from Sweden, chromium from Turkey, and machinery from Switzerland. Each bar of gold represented not just theft from the dead, but direct financing of weapons used against Allied forces. Victims' gold quite literally funded the war machine that was simultaneously murdering other victims. Emil Puhl would later testify that he raised concerns about accepting SS gold, particularly shipments that obviously came from victims. His objections were overruled by Walther Funk, president of the Reichsbank and former Reich Minister of Economics. Funk's defense would be that he was following orders from higher authority. The orders came directly from Hitler and Himmler: maximize economic extraction from the final solution by any means necessary. The scale of theft extended beyond gold. The Reichsbank also received and processed massive quantities of foreign currency seized from victims: dollars, pounds, francs, zlotys, and dozens of other currencies. Precious stones, particularly diamonds, were evaluated and sold through networks of dealers. The SS even collected and sold human hair used in the textile industry. Nothing was too small, too intimate, or too horrifying to be commodified. Switzerland's role in laundering Nazi gold represents one of the most controversial chapters of World War II financial history. Swiss banks accepted Nazi gold throughout the war, providing the Third Reich with vital foreign currency reserves and international financial legitimacy. The Swiss government and banks would later claim ignorance about the source of this gold, but evidence reveals a far more complicated and compromising reality. Switzerland's position as a neutral nation made it uniquely valuable to the Nazi regime. While Germany was at war with most of Europe, Switzerland maintained diplomatic and commercial relations with both Axis and Allied powers. Swiss banks could convert Nazi assets into internationally acceptable currencies that could then be used for trade with other neutral nations. This made Switzerland the laundromat for stolen wealth. The Swiss National Bank purchased approximately $1.3 billion worth of gold from Nazi Germany during the war, roughly $12 billion in today's value. This gold came from two sources: national reserves looted from conquered countries and victim gold processed through Operation Reinhard. The Belgian National Bank's gold reserves, seized by Germany in 1940, flowed through Swiss accounts. The Dutch Central Bank's gold met the same fate, and mixed in with these official reserves came the refined, recast gold bars from Degussa, derived from wedding rings and dental fillings. Swiss bankers were sophisticated financial professionals who understood international gold markets. They knew that Germany had exhausted its legitimate gold reserves early in the war. They knew that Germany controlled territories where massive Jewish populations had been concentrated and then disappeared. They received warnings from Allied governments about accepting looted gold. The Allied Declaration of January 1943 explicitly stated that the Allies would not recognize any transfers of property in occupied territories and warned neutral nations that they would be held accountable for accepting stolen assets. Swiss banks continued accepting Nazi gold for 2 more years. The operational mechanism was straightforward. The Reichsbank would transfer gold to Swiss banks, primarily the Swiss National Bank, but also major private banks like Credit Suisse and Union Bank of Switzerland. The Swiss banks would credit the Reichsbank's account with Swiss francs. These francs were then used to purchase goods from Swiss industries or converted to other currencies for purchases from other neutral countries. The gold stayed in Swiss vaults, gradually becoming clean through the simple passage of time and paperwork. What made Swiss banks particularly valuable was their secrecy laws. Switzerland had enacted strict banking secrecy regulations in 1934, making it a criminal offense to reveal information about bank accounts. This meant that wealth could be deposited, transferred, and withdrawn with almost complete anonymity. Nazi officials, including SS officers who had personally enriched themselves through camp theft, used Swiss accounts to hide personal fortunes. These weren't official state transactions. They were individual acts of theft within the larger theft. Post-war investigations estimated that Swiss banks held hundreds of millions of dollars in unclaimed assets from Holocaust victims. Money deposited for safekeeping before the war, never reclaimed because the depositors were murdered. Additionally, Swiss accounts held personal fortunes of Nazi officials, laundered through the same banking system that processed official Reichsbank transactions. The two streams of money, victim assets and stolen assets, flowed through the same institutions, sometimes into the same accounts. Swiss banks also provided another crucial service. They allowed Germany to trade with allied nations even during wartime. Because Switzerland maintained neutrality and Swiss currency was internationally accepted, the Germans could use Swiss financial intermediaries to purchase goods from South American countries or conduct business with companies in allied nations through elaborate shell companies and third-party arrangements. Swiss neutrality wasn't just political, it was financial infrastructure that enabled genocide to be profitable. After the war, Switzerland would initially resist international pressure to return looted gold or open its books about Nazi accounts. The Washington Agreement of 1946 required Switzerland to return only a fraction of the estimated gold value, $50 million out of approximately $500 million in looted gold. The rest remained in Swiss hands, gradually absorbed into the legitimate economy through accounting adjustments and the passage of time. As for private accounts, Swiss banks maintained they couldn't reveal information due to banking secrecy laws, even when the account holders were confirmed dead in the Holocaust. The Swiss defense rested on several arguments. They were neutral and had no way to verify gold sources. They had to protect their financial institutions from German military threats, and their banks were simply following standard international banking practices. Each argument contained partial truths, wrapped around complete moral failure. Swiss banks made calculated decisions to profit from genocide, and those decisions gave the Nazi war machine vital financial breathing room at crucial moments. The Nazi war economy was perpetually on the brink of collapse. Germany entered World War II without sufficient resources for a prolonged conflict. The Blitzkrieg strategy, rapid, overwhelming military strikes, was partly motivated by economic necessity. Germany couldn't afford a long war. Every month of continued fighting depleted resources Germany didn't have. This resource crisis made stolen wealth not merely profitable, but essential to Nazi military operations. Conservative estimates suggest that property seized from victims of the Holocaust provided approximately 30% of the German war budget between 1942 and 1945. This figure includes not just gold and currency processed through official channels, but the total value of all confiscated property: real estate, businesses, bank accounts, securities, and personal possessions. The Economic and Administrative Main Office of the SS calculated that during 1943 alone, concentration camp exploitation, forced labor combined with property confiscation, generated approximately 600 million Reichmarks for the German state. The financial flows worked through multiple channels. Gold and currency seized from victims went to the Reichsbank, which used it to purchase foreign currency and trade with neutral nations. This foreign currency bought vital war materials: Swedish ball bearings for tanks, Portuguese wolfram for armor-piercing ammunition, Spanish mercury for explosives, Turkish chromium for steel hardening. Each of these materials was essential for weapons production. Without access to these resources, German military production would have collapsed even faster than it did. Confiscated property within Germany and occupied territories provided more direct benefits. Seized apartments were used to house displaced German families after Allied bombing raids. Furniture, kitchenware, clothing, and household goods stripped from Jewish homes were distributed to German civilians or sold through official channels, with proceeds flowing to state coffers. In Poland alone, German occupation authorities seized an estimated $20 billion in property from Jewish families and communities. This property was either shipped to Germany, sold locally to fund occupation costs, or distributed to ethnic German settlers. The SS operated its own economic empire, built almost entirely on slave labor and stolen property. The SS-owned companies DEST, German Earth and Stone Works, DLW, German Equipment Works, and others produced construction materials, textiles, and armaments using concentration camp prisoners working without wages, fed starvation rations, and worked to death. The profits went directly to the SS organization, which used them to expand the concentration camp system, fund SS military units, and enrich SS leadership. Perhaps most disturbing was how thoroughly stolen wealth integrated into everyday German wartime life. Wehrmacht soldiers received pay partly funded by confiscated wealth. Their weapons, uniforms, and equipment were produced using materials purchased with victim gold. German families used furniture, wore clothing, and cooked with utensils taken from deported families. The economic exploitation of genocide wasn't separate from German wartime society. It was woven throughout it. The impact extended beyond direct military spending. German industry became addicted to slave labor and stolen materials. By 1944, approximately 7.6 million forced laborers and concentration camp prisoners worked in German industry, comprising more than 20% of the workforce. Major corporations, IG Farben, Krupp, Volkswagen, BMW, Daimler-Benz, operated factories using concentration camp labor. They paid the SS nominal fees for this labor, far below market wages, generating enormous profits while contributing to the systematic destruction of imprisoned populations. The financial desperation of the Nazi state became more acute as the war turned against Germany. After defeats at Stalingrad and in North Africa, after D-Day and the Soviet advance from the east, the German economy was running on borrowed time and stolen resources. The intensification of the final solution in 1944, the deportation and murder of Hungarian Jewry, the liquidation of remaining ghettos, coincided with Germany's most desperate resource situation. The Hungarian operation alone brought massive wealth into SS coffers, just as the war was clearly lost, suggesting that economic extraction remained a priority even as military defeat became inevitable. This wasn't mere opportunistic theft that happened alongside war. The murder of millions was economically motivated policy, justified to Nazi leadership partly through the resources it generated. The final solution was many things: ideologically driven genocide, racial pseudoscience-made policy, bureaucratic mass murder, but it was also a resource extraction operation on a scale never before attempted. The war ended in May 1945. As Allied forces occupied Germany, they began discovering the scale of Nazi theft. Gold reserves that should have been in national banks across Europe were found in salt mines, buried in forests, hidden in bank vaults. The Reichsbank's records, partially preserved, documented years of systematic looting, but recovering the stolen wealth would prove almost as complicated as the theft itself. The Nuremberg trials addressed crimes against humanity, but they also examined the economic infrastructure that enabled those crimes. Walther Funk, president of the Reichsbank, stood trial for his role in accepting and processing SS gold. His defense was simple. He was a banker following orders from state authorities. Emil Puhl, who had personally overseen the transactions, testified about shipments containing dental gold and jewelry that obviously came from victims. Despite this testimony, Funk received only a life sentence, which was later commuted. He was released in 1957 and died 3 years later, never having returned a penny of stolen wealth. The corporate executives faced similar accountability, or lack thereof. IG Farben executives who oversaw operations at Auschwitz stood trial. Some received sentences ranging from 1 to 8 years. Most were released early. By the 1950s, many had resumed positions in German industry. The message was clear: participation in genocide, if conducted through corporate and financial structures, would not be severely punished. The gold itself became the subject of complex international negotiations. The Tripartite Gold Commission was established in 1946 to restore monetary gold looted by Germany to its rightful national owners. The commission eventually recovered and redistributed approximately $65 million in gold, a fraction of what was stolen. Much of this gold came from reserves found in Germany at war's end. The gold that had already been laundered through Swiss banks, converted to currency, and spent on war materials was simply gone. What about the personal property? What about the wedding rings, the currency sewn into clothing, the jewelry hidden in shoe heels? Most of it was never recovered. Some was found in the abandoned Kanada barracks at Auschwitz, warehouses still full of clothing, shoes, and personal items when Soviet forces arrived. These goods were too late to return to their owners, nearly all of whom were dead. The items became museum exhibits, silent testimony to systematic theft. The question of Swiss banks and their accounts became increasingly controversial as decades passed. Switzerland maintained that banking secrecy laws prevented revealing information about accounts, even for Holocaust victims. This position was legally defensible under Swiss law, but morally indefensible to the international community. Pressure mounted through the 1990s as survivor organizations and international investigations demanded accountability. In 1996, the World Jewish Congress, led by Edgar Bronfman, pushed for a comprehensive audit of Swiss banks. Swiss banks initially resisted, claiming that most records from the war period had been destroyed. Under intense international pressure, an investigation was finally conducted. It revealed that Swiss banks held approximately $600 million in dormant accounts that likely belonged to Holocaust victims. Many account holders had been murdered. Their families didn't know the accounts existed or couldn't navigate Swiss bureaucratic requirements to claim them. The resulting settlement in 1998 required Swiss banks to pay $1.25 billion in restitution. This wasn't just for dormant accounts. It was also compensation for the bank's role in laundering Nazi gold and profiting from genocide. Swiss banks never admitted wrongdoing, framing the settlement as a gesture of historical reconciliation rather than an acknowledgement of guilt. The payout was distributed to thousands of claimants worldwide, though many survivors received only a few $1,000s each, a pittance compared to what had been stolen. Germany itself established restitution programs, but these were limited and bureaucratically challenging. To claim compensation, survivors needed documentation proving property ownership or persecution, documents that had often been destroyed, along with the communities that created them. Early restitution programs required claimants to apply individually and prove their losses, a process that excluded many elderly survivors who lacked energy, resources, or documentation. Many died before receiving anything. The restitution efforts improved over time. The Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, established in 1951, negotiated compensation programs and distributed funds to survivors. As of 2025, Germany has paid approximately $90 billion in restitution to Holocaust survivors and their heirs. This sounds substantial until compared to the estimated $180 billion stolen, adjusted for inflation. And money, regardless of amount, cannot restore what was truly lost: families, communities, cultures, and lives. 80 years after liberation, the story of Nazi theft continues in unexpected ways. Bank vaults across Europe and North America still contain unclaimed assets from Holocaust victims. Real estate seized during the war remains in disputed ownership. Art stolen from Jewish collectors appears periodically at auction houses, triggering legal battles over provenance. The theft of 1933 to 1945 echoes through generations. Consider the art. Nazis systematically looted artwork from Jewish collectors, dealers, and museums across occupied Europe. Hermann Göring personally amassed a collection of thousands of paintings, sculptures, and artifacts, almost all stolen. The Nazis operated the ERR, Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, a state organization dedicated specifically to looting cultural property. They took Rembrandts from Amsterdam, Klimts from Vienna, entire collections from Paris galleries. Some art was shipped to Germany for Hitler's planned Führer Museum in Linz. Other pieces were sold through neutral countries to fund war operations. After the war, Allied forces recovered hundreds of thousands of artworks from salt mines, castles, and warehouses. The monument's men, art historians and museum professionals in uniform, worked to identify and return this art to rightful owners. They succeeded in many cases, but thousands of works were never claimed because the owners were dead and their heirs didn't know the art existed. Other pieces were returned to countries rather than individuals, ending up in national museums where they remain today, their true provenance unclear. Modern provenance research continues uncovering stolen art in museum collections and private hands. In 2006, Austrian museums were forced to return 5 Klimt paintings to the heirs of Adele Bloch-Bauer, whose family had been dispossessed by the Nazis. The paintings were valued at over $300 million. Similar cases emerge regularly. A family discovers their grandparents' art collection was seized. They begin researching. They find a painting in a museum or at an auction. Then begins the legal battle to prove ownership and demand restitution. Real estate presents an even more complex problem. Entire apartment buildings in Berlin, Vienna, Paris, and Amsterdam were seized from Jewish owners. After the war, these properties often weren't returned because the owners and their families were dead. The properties were absorbed into state housing programs or sold to new owners who purchased them in good faith, unaware of the theft in the property's history. 70 years later, distant relatives of the original owners surface, claiming legal title to properties now worth millions. Who has the stronger claim, the heir of the theft victim or the current owner who purchased legally decades ago? The question of corporate accountability remains unresolved. German corporations that profited from slave labor and stolen property eventually established a collective compensation fund in 2000, the Foundation for Remembrance, Responsibility, and the Future. The fund distributed approximately $8 billion to former forced laborers and other victims. But this was settled as a final closure, preventing further lawsuits. Companies paid into the fund to achieve legal peace, not as admission of moral culpability. Degussa, the company that refined gold from Auschwitz victims, continued operating after the war. It merged, restructured, and became part of Evonik Industries. The company acknowledges its wartime role but frames it as historical fact rather than ongoing moral obligation. The company exists today, profitable and respectable, built partly on a foundation of processed dental gold and melted wedding rings. Swiss banks continue holding assets that may belong to Holocaust victims or their heirs. Despite the 1998 settlement, new cases emerge. Someone finds a document mentioning a Swiss bank account. The bank claims no records exist. Legal battles ensue. The resolution often favors the bank, which has resources for extended litigation that elderly survivors or their descendants lack. The most haunting aspect is the assets that will never be claimed because no one survived to claim them. Entire families were murdered, leaving no heirs. Communities were destroyed completely, leaving no one who remembered what was lost. In Jewish tradition, property of those who die without heirs goes to the community. But when the entire community is destroyed, who inherits? This question has no adequate answer. We return to where we began. August 1944, Auschwitz-Birkenau, a transport arriving from Hungary. Families separated, possessions confiscated, lives ended. But now we understand the complete architecture of what happened next. Those possessions didn't vanish into chaos. They entered a system specifically designed to transform personal property into state assets, to convert genocide into profit, to make mass murder economically productive. The looted wealth funded 30% of Nazi Germany's war costs between 1942 and 1945. That's not an abstract historical statistic. It means that nearly every third bullet fired by Wehrmacht soldiers, every third tank that rolled across Europe, every third aerial bomb dropped on Allied cities was financed, directly or indirectly, by property seized from victims of the Holocaust. The gold in Swiss vaults came from wedding rings and teeth. The currency used to purchase Swedish ball bearings was found sewn into the coat linings of families boarding trains. The system was so efficient that victims literally financed their own destruction. This story raises questions that remain unresolved 80 years later. What is the statute of limitations on theft when the victims were murdered? When does stolen property become legitimately owned through the passage of time? What responsibility do institutions bear for profiting from genocide? The legal answers exist. Treaties, settlements, foundations established and closed. But the moral answers are more elusive. Switzerland became prosperous partly through Nazi gold. German corporations rebuilt themselves with assets and infrastructure developed through slave labor. Private individuals across Europe lived in apartments, wore clothing, and used household goods taken from deported neighbors. The economic benefit of genocide spread far beyond SS officers and Nazi leadership. It permeated societies that claimed afterward to be either victims of Nazism or neutral observers. Today, approximately $90 billion has been paid in restitution and compensation by Germany and German companies. Switzerland paid $1.25 billion through its banking settlement. These numbers sound large until compared to $180 billion stolen, adjusted for inflation. And still, artwork hangs in museums without clear provenance. Bank accounts remain unclaimed. Real estate disputes continue. The theft has never been fully accounted for, let alone repaid. The deeper lesson transcends financial calculations. The Nazi looting system succeeded because thousands of ordinary professionals, bankers, accountants, corporate managers, refinery workers, shipping clerks, made the decision day after day to participate. They processed the paperwork, they melted the gold, they transferred the funds, they kept the records. Most were never punished. Many continued their careers after the war. The message sent to history was that genocide, if conducted through proper bureaucratic channels, offers participation with minimal risk. We tell ourselves that we would have acted differently. We would have refused. We would have resisted. But the evidence suggests otherwise. The Nazi economic exploitation of the Holocaust succeeded precisely because so many ordinary people made ordinary decisions to follow regulations, obey superiors, and prioritize job security over moral objection. The banality of evil, as philosopher Hannah Arendt observed, was its most terrifying characteristic. What remains today are the fading voices of survivors, the diminishing number of those who can testify to what they witnessed, the documentation preserved in archives, the physical remnants at Auschwitz and other sites where piles of shoes and suitcases still testify to individual lives reduced to commodities, and the ongoing legal battles over property and compensation, each case a reminder that theft on this scale has no expiration date. The Nazi looting system was unprecedented in scope and efficiency. But the willingness of institutions to profit from atrocity, the readiness of professionals to participate in systems they know are wrong, the ability of societies to absorb stolen wealth and ask no questions, these are not unique to 1940s Europe. These are human vulnerabilities that persist across time and culture. History remembers the gas chambers and the firing squads. It remembers the death camps and the mass graves. It must also remember the sorting tables at Kanada, the refineries at Degussa, the vaults at Swiss banks, and the offices where bureaucrats calculated the economic value of genocide. Because theft on this scale required not just perpetrators, but enablers, not just criminals, but collaborators. Not just evil, but ordinary people making ordinary compromises. The price of that complicity was paid in blood and gold. The bill is still coming due. If this story moved you, challenged you, or helped you see the Second World War differently, it would be an honor to have you join our growing community. Subscribing isn't just a click. It's a way to support more powerful stories, more forgotten voices, and more truth from the past. So if you believe these stories matter, hit that subscribe button and let's keep building this journey together. And don't forget to leave a comment. We read everyone and love hearing your thoughts. Until next time, keep exploring history with Epic War. Keep asking questions. Keep seeking the truth.